Hi friends, welcome to Organic True Crime with Sydney Hopes, where I talk about true crime stories, kind of talk. This month I'm focusing on bootleggers during Prohibition, and today I'm going to be talking about one of Al Capone's biggest rivals, a man named Bugs Moran. George Bugs Moran was born in Minnesota in 1893. I can't not say it like that, Minnesota. In 1893 to Maria and Jules Conan. His father, Jules, was a French immigrant, and his mother, Maria, was Canadian. I wonder if French Canadian, I don't know. Anyway, Bugs was sent to a private Catholic school until he turned 18 when he decided to quit and join a local bootlegging gang in Minnesota. Bugs went to juvenile detention 3 times before he turned 21, which is when he decided to run away to Chicago. And in Chicago, he continued committing crimes, and they were mostly pretty large-scale crimes, things like stealing racehorses or robbing a freight car, so like pretty expensive robberies. And also during this time, Bugs met his first wife, a woman named Lucille, and the couple had one son together in 1920, but shortly after, Lucille left Bugs because of his criminal lifestyle. So in the 1920s in America, production and sale of alcohol was made illegal, which led to a rise in organized crime during this Prohibition time. And basically, there were moonshiners that would illegally make the alcohol, and then there were groups of criminals that would then take it and illegally distribute it. And in Chicago at the time, there were a lot of bootlegging were the ones that distributed it. There were a lot of bootlegging groups, bootleggers, I guess, in Chicago at the time. But there are 2 specific ones that I'm talking about today. One being the North Side Gang, which is where Bugs Moran ended up, and the other being the South Side Gang, which at the time was being run by Al Capone. So Bugs Moran joined the North Side Gang, which at the time was being run by a man named Dean O'Banion and was mostly made up of Irish immigrants. And their largest rival at the time was the South Side Gang, which was being run by Al Capone and was mostly made up of Italian immigrants. And both of the 2 groups dealt with bootlegging and illegally selling alcohol, but Al Capone's group also ran a prostitution organization in Chicago, which Dean O'Banion and his family really did not agree with and were strongly against. So the competition and also their questionable morals led to a rivalry between the 2. And this was a very violent rivalry with constant attacks back and forth between the 2 and lots of deaths in both groups. In 1924, Dean O'Banion was killed in one of these attacks, and Bugs Moran became basically a co-leader of the group with a man named Jaime Weiss. And 2 years later, in 1926, the group made an attempt on Al Capone's life, and it failed. And because of that, Al Capone retaliated and had Jaime Weiss killed, which meant that Bugs Moran was now the sole leader of the North Side Gang. And after the Al Capone attempt and then retaliated murder, this led to an escalation of their fights that they were already having, and there were even more back and forth attacks between the 2 until Valentine's Day of 1929. So, apparently, Bugs Moran was offered a truckload of whiskey at an unbeatable price, so he arranged to have this truckload of whiskey delivered to a garage where he kept some of his bootlegging vehicles on Valentine's Day of 1929. And Bugs happened to be running a little late that day. But he was running late for the delivery, and when he pulled up, he saw that there was a cop car out front. So he assumed they were being raided because what they did was illegal, so he decided to back up and go to a local cafe instead of going to the garage. What actually happened was members of Al Capone's group faked the truckload of whiskey, and 2 of them dressed up as police officers and 2 of them just regular came along. and they were led into the garage where they lined up all 7 employees, or are they employees? All 7 men that were working in the garage, and they falsely identified one of the men as being Bugs Moran, so they lined everybody up and they shot everyone. All 7 men died. And since witnesses saw that there was a police car there, they assumed that police had already been alerted of all the gunshots or what was happening in the garage. So that led to a delayed reaction from police. And by the time they did finally get there, 6 of the 7 men had already died. And one of them, the one who was still alive, refused to give any names because that is apparently part of the code. So he didn't give any names, and then he also died. After this, Bugs Moran was obviously very upset and planning to get back at Al Capone. Apparently, Bugs was not as worried about the code as his fellow members because he went to police and told them that Al Capone killed all 70 of these men. But Al Capone was in Florida at the time, so he didn't, but he at least could have arranged it. So they did go to court, kind of, because Al Capone said he was sick and he didn't show up for 2 court dates, and then that was it. They didn't do anything. They just were like, well, don't think it was him, I guess. Just didn't do anything. And it is thought and speculated that maybe Mr. Al Capone did have some influence in law enforcement in the area at the time. So maybe there was a reason that they didn't want to prosecute him for anything. But that was it. He didn't get in trouble. Nobody did for these murders. So Bugs Moran was now even more upset and trying to find a way to get back at Al Capone. The Northside Gang did retaliate by killing one of the men that was responsible for what is now known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. This was a man named Jack McGurn. But after that, they just kind of all drifted apart and the Northside Gang just dissolved. Bugs Moran ended up moving away from Chicago and going back to doing his smaller thefts and also getting arrested until February 25th of 1957, when Bugs Moran died at the age of 63 of lung cancer while in prison serving a sentence for bank robbery. So that is Bugs Moran. Let me know what you thought of it. I always find stories like this very interesting, and I thought I would start with Prohibition times, when it kind of started, when a rise of it, organized crime became a thing. And I don't know, it's difficult because it's something that was illegal only for a very brief time, mostly that they dealt with. But because of that, because it was made illegal for a little bit, people started having to be really sketchy to do it because they're going to anyway. And it led to so many deaths, which I guess it got taken back, and I can see why, because then towns, cities like this just let people with questionable morals run their city so that they could have alcohol, and then just kind of ignored everything else that they were doing. And they were running the cities. They had everyone under anyway. Let me know what you thought of that one, and I'll see you next week for more. Bye.